Synth Design Podcast. After a break of close to a year, I am pleased to share with you a conversation I had with Stijn and Priscilla from This Is Not Rocket Science in Amsterdam. This episode is super special because I actually went there by train. I live in Rotterdam, they live in Amsterdam. It's about an hour of a train ride with some cycling in between. And I was in this remarkable, magical place where they designed and manufactured the Fenix alongside a lot of other modules that you guys are probably familiar with. We are starting with a little tour, then we go into the process of inspiration and design. I'm trying to understand why they have broken violins in this little research lab of theirs, or why they have so many soldering irons. Chopsticks. What? You'll see. I need to address the elephant in the room here. I actually released a product just a couple of weeks after I went to their home. This is why I couldn't release this on time. It was planned to be released in May, June, something like that. I had no idea how complicated it is to release your own instruments or your own kits, your own things. The amount of time it requires to do this stuff is just crazy. And I admire each and one of you who are doing this and serving people around the world with your inspiration, your ideas, and your products. So thank you to all of you who are actually doing this. And if you're watching this and you're like, oh man, I really want to do this, or like you're a musician maybe and you're really wondering how people do this kind of stuff and build their own instruments, know that it's probably easier to build an instrument than to actually do the logistics for it. There are certain things that are just very hard to learn because there are no tutorials on this. You just need to figure things out like old school way, and like you need to have a network of people to like do logistics. Otherwise, like no one even talks to you. Anyway, let's put this aside. This conversation is insightful and it has so much in it that I should just stop talking and take you with me into this basement where This Is Not Rocket Science are making their own magic.
Hello, welcome.
Hey Stijn, how's it going?
It's great. It's welcome to our factory house. Just our house. With the famous kitchen table where we do all the things.
Woohoo! A lot of the things happen.
Yeah,
yes.
And the green wall.
Yes.
Very cool. This is how things look in Amsterdam. Tiny and beautiful. Cool. So I'm gonna get a tour.
Yes. There's also a bit outside, but it's maybe for later.
Oh wow.
Welcome in the mess.
Oh my god.
This is where we.
In Amsterdam, it has a surprise.
This is the current production run we're working on, calibrating all the artibills and leftovers from the test rig of the Fenix, some Fenix prototypes, an old Fenix II, and the studio area where I spend my nights working on Fenixes and modules and weird stuff.
This is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
This is all the this is sort of what you need to get to eventually a Fenix. So you have to try everything, build everything, burn your fingers on everything,
Take
and then
it apart.
take it apart.
Put it
Yeah,
back together.
pretty much all the synthesizers you see around the place have their screws taken out because we're always digging inside. Then I lose the screws, and then
Did you abuse this DX7?
It's in one piece.
Define abuse.
Yeah.
Some dead violins in there.
Yeah, I bought some broken violins because I don't dare buy a new violin and put the saw in it and just find out and mount probes in it. But I found some broken violins in an auction house that I could buy for cheap, and then I don't feel so bad killing an instrument. So we have a bunch of those. I also tried
He was
building some.
investigating how the sound
The
moves
acoustics
inside
of
the body of the violin.
Yeah.
How the waves move. Yeah, he's just
Yeah,
testing
a bunch
that.
of simulations of that.
Some old guitars.
Yeah, home built
He also
guitars.
has trouble throwing stuff away. It's no longer.
Yeah, it
Not
might all come in
useful.
handy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with tools, of course, because we always need all the tools eventually anyway. There's lots of case experiments. There's custom controller experiments to find out if this might go somewhere. We have I had a multi-microphone thing somewhere that I still don't have a purpose for. Yeah, the list is just huge. So point at something, there is a story.
Yeah, the workbench. Workbench with the microscope and
Yeah.
the mess on it.
Oh, here's the microphone. This is one of those prototypes that just accidentally happens because there's a tiny microphone inside the Fenix, and I've always wanted to find out if you could record a wavefront from audio hitting a sheet, and these tiny surface mount microphones are small enough that you can now just mount 16 of them on a board and stream them to an audio interface and play with it. You can make directional beamforming microphone things out of this. But now I have it, and I have no clue what to do with it. I just made it, and I don't have time to actually experiment with it yet. So that's sitting here until the time comes.
I have a lot of things like that around, and then it might end up in some module or an instrument, or it might not.
Yeah, tons of books everywhere, of course. Production rejects everywhere. There's this whole pile here. This, I call it, yeah, everything from the Fenix that didn't make our QC pass and that we couldn't actually repair in time ended up here. There's actually a modest pile compared to
Yeah.
the run that we did. But since somebody online already asked about my favorite Doctor Who episode, here's the...
Yeah, this Ziffer, this is for you.
Yeah, this is inside the Fenix, hidden several layers deep, so nobody should ever get to see this in normal operation, but it's there anyway. But yeah, everything always gets decorated way more than we probably should, but...
You are talking to a graphic designer, you know, for me
Yeah.
this is like, of course you have to do this.
Yes, but
This is very important.
Yeah.
But assembly houses sometimes complain because their soldering workers get dizzy looking at it, and it's not very good for the final quality of your board. But most of this should be touched by machines only, so then it's okay. Oh yeah, the stacks of reels, because we need prototyping parts for everything. We also do regular trips to China to stock up on weird prototyping parts.
We used to.
Yeah, we used to before COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think you have enough soldering irons?
Yes. Use them all the time, have them set to different temperature ranges, and sometimes even use them as chopstick style, two in one hand. Get the difficult parts out.
Chopsticks, what?
Yes.
How? Why?
Have them chopstick style, and then just get components two sides at the same time. It's just,
As one does.
yes, as one has to. There's one over there.
Is that also a reject or just a
No, there's also a reject.
Yeah.
I don't really know why anymore, but it's just...
And, that's,
And look at
that's
this.
The insides.
This is the first prototype that we made that we brought to Super Booth. It's a single PCB.
So this was 2018.
2019.
19.
Yeah, 19 we went to Super Booth to show the first working version, which was only about like 60% working. But nobody ever found out. We made sure the rest worked before it was really done anyway.
If you're hearing this, so this is the burn-in rack for the Fenixes, but most of them are gone now.
A burning rack? What is that?
So what we after it's completely done and calibrated and tested, we keep it on for I think 48 hours for
At least.
every Fenix. Because if components inside break, they tend to break in like the first few hours of being on. So everything we send out gets a burn-in test of usually 48 hours. So that when it breaks here. And I don't think anything broke in our burn-in.
Some stuff did went off calibration, so we can
Not broken, but
Yeah.
out of calibrated area.
out of calibration. So we upgrade a bit, reburn it. But yeah, now they're of course all gone. So we had these nice protective boxes, and this whole column gets really hot. So then.
So how long have you been working in this space here?
In this building since 2008.
2008.
Yeah.
And how old? Like, I mean, Fenix is just a few years old, but then you've done a lot of modules way earlier.
Well, modules way earlier. We started 7 years ago, I think. But my audio work, my first commercial audio work was in 2002, and my first non-commercial audio work was when I was 4 years old, somewhere in 1985. But the first things I released must have been 1996, 1997. I must have released lots of DSP plugins for at the moment where real-time audio became possible on home PCs. That was when I was learning how to program, and I really wanted to make music, so I had to learn that, and then I had a lot of fun playing with that stuff.
So you've been programming for like 20...
More.
30 years.
Yeah, 30
like
30 something years, yeah.
But a lot of this stuff is actually analog.
Yes, and a lot of it's also digital.
Right.
But that's always, with any computation, you can perform the computation digitally, which is really precise clock ticks and precise, always the same result. But not always the most efficient in terms of energy or resources or price. So it always becomes a trade-off. And some stuff you just have to do analog because it makes more sense, and some stuff you have to do digital because it makes more sense. And if you're building a system that's supposed to be the best of all worlds, then for each component you select what's best. So in a Fenix there's 8 separate microcontrollers. So it's all one big digital knot. Some of it is completely analog, some of it's completely digital, some of it is fly-by-wire analog, so there's an analog circuit that's being controlled by some digital spider, sort of.
Like record also there.
Yeah, it's sort of adjusting it on the fly to keep it in check, and then it's all networked, of course, and then there's things you can do if it's networked, like having shared quantizer settings or timing settings, all that stuff. That's all hooked up.
Yeah. So it seems like everything comes from a concept.
Yeah.
And then you decide on the technology and the approach to tackle this concept.
Yeah.
Based on what you feel like, okay, this would make sense. It could be analog, it could be digital.
It could be physical.
Could be physical.
Yeah, or it could be not at all. A virtual thing is always better than a thing.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. So it could also stay in the concept. Do you have any ideas that were like, okay, this is just gonna be on paper?
No, not yet. I always make the mistake of trying to build it. but I always feel, especially now in a resource-constrained world, that if I can already experience what it was like to own the thing without actually having to own the thing or even having built the thing, that saves so much energy, and I can still be happy that I've read about the thing. So sort of science fiction is the ultimate product development for me, because I don't need to own anything, and I still enjoy the fact that it could have existed.
That's beautiful. That's a really good way of looking at things. Yeah.
Actually making something feels like a concession. Or I really want it so much that reading about it is no longer enough.
I see here a box of, it just says knobs.
Yeah, what do you think is in there?
I don't know.
Oh, there's knobs inside.
Oh my god. That is a lot of very exciting stuff that we're going to be seeing here. That's awesome. Okay, we need to charge this beast. Let's look at this beautiful thing. It's like a city.
Yeah.
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 Ducks. Let's talk about ducks.
Ducks. This is a painting made for my mother by some guy that was really into her. Tried to woo her over by giving her this painting, and for some reason
pregnant with you.
Yeah, well, pregnant with me.
Yeah.
So this ended up in my baby room, and it's been with me ever since.
Now that is a story you don't really hear that often.
No.
So and what do we have like here in the back?
Which one? This
thing.
Oh, this is a prototype front panel for the Synth Pan. This is something that's still not done yet, and we're still working on it. This is a new keyboard. Well, there's no keys attached to it right now. But this is sort of the production notes of how we thought we might want to change the interface compared to what it was on this version.
This is also basically where the Fenix started, because this is where us getting to know the people from Synth came from. Is from their project Pan, where they're masters of of synths, but a little while ago. So trying to connect to the new digital, it must somehow be plugged into a modern studio. They ended up at our kitchen table. And then we ended up discussing the Fenix II, and then we ended up building the Fenix IV. So it's from the Pan that came the other project. And this is still ongoing, but it's going a bit slower, which, unfortunately has to do with some health issues on their side.
Right. They've been active from like the 70s, didn't they?
Yeah, end of the 70s, early 80s, and then...
they were really big in the Netherlands then.
Everywhere. They were just big.
They were just
they run Musicon, which was sort of the super booth back then, and they had offices in several countries and lots of employees, and then through no fault of their own, they were forced into bankruptcy and sort of stop. And out of the ashes of that came the Fenix. That's also
why it's called that.
Yeah, why it's the Fenix.
Yeah.
And then
Bert made that.
Yeah, with some other designers from the original Synth company. But
Bert Vermeulen. He's, some people have talents in some areas. He's like the audio circuit whisperer. He has somehow a very natural understanding of how things that make sound should be built in an analog fashion. While not being a musician at all, like not being on that side, he's fully in the building, in the circuitry side of things, in the schematic side of things. Yeah, but he's really good at it, which is, I think, why the Fenix was so amazing, because there's a strange talent behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a great starting point.
And it was lovely, because the other designer for the Fenix IV is Lauri, that we work with. And I think especially him and Bert, they went through a lot of the schematics of the Fenix II that Bert did. But he then explained, why. Because it's just a drawing, but there's a lot of decisions behind it and ideas of how sound and how circuitry works. And to me, it really looked like, he was explaining how the inside of his mind works to somebody else who could completely understand what he was talking about. Because Lauri's also a bit the same, I guess. Also has this weird talent for that. So that was, even though I don't technically understand what was going on, it was just amazing to see that sort of sharing. Also
on a weird meta level, even looking at where Bert's eyes go when looking at a schematic taught me a lot about reading schematics. Like, you have this wall of components. Where do you start looking? Well, Bert starts there. That might have a reason. Let's do that too. And then sort of see how he reads the flow, and then after a year of being submerged into Fenix schematics, to sort of start seeing why that was the flow. Still learning about all that, but it feels more natural now. So there's been great interaction with the old Synth guys.
Yeah.
And we're still working on the next thing, the final version. I can sort of show a prototype later on. There's something hidden on the other side. We have a more full-fledged thing out there. We have also already showed it Super Booth, but it has a new keyboard. So instead of just playing, you can also play sideways and in front back, and really sensitive, like a violin string. You can have vibrato in violin. You can also have vibrato in your piano keys this way. So they need more tactile. I have the synthesizer, but now I cannot even play half of it because I can't put my feelings into it, because there's not these tiny motions that I was used to with guitars and drums and trumpets and whatever.
So in a very different way, it's so weird, like the squishy.
The Roly.
Not the Roly. The red and black.
The Haken.
The Haken. Yeah, they also found it like a more expressive way of controlling a synthesizer. Yeah.
Yeah, you actually just before you mentioned something about analyzing not analog, but acoustic instruments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we maybe talk a little bit about that? Because I know that there is a huge inspiration when you are going into electronic music. Like the first frustration is like, okay, this is not like an acoustic instrument because of so many different things. You basically need to recreate acoustics and imagine acoustics in perhaps in even a different way than what acoustics are even are.
Yeah.
So like, how do you approach something like this?
With full despair. There's the amount of computation that the universe throws at something simple as a violin is fast. So if you're building a simple circuit, you're making one line of computation where nature would have literally done billions of atoms doing their own computation at the same time, and on average producing this beautiful tone. So you're always looking for shortcuts to not have to do all of that, and then do just enough so it's convincing and expressive enough for people. So it's
So it's not so much of trying to actually rebuild what's going on in the physical world, because that would take all of the physical world. But it's what in that is it that appeals to us and that could be interesting to control. And if you take it a step back, I find it very interesting that usually when we have a virtual something where we can synthesize what reality is, the first thing we do is mimic reality we have, which is kind of strange. It gives you the option to go beyond, to do something completely different, but the first thing we want is no. It has to work like a piano or like a violin.
Yeah.
So there's also a disconnect there that on the one hand I appreciate, because that's what we're used to, what we expect, and what we're sort of prone to like. But I'm also always interested, but where can we break that?
Absolutely.
Because this gives us the space to break that.
Yeah.
Why not?
and also we can instead of trying to simulate or take physicality and simulate it good enough so it gets close to the reality that we want, you could also start at the result and break down the result and work backwards.
Yeah.
And then find out, okay, like a drum, you have a proper drum synth is again super expensive to compute. You can have weeks of sort of wavefront tracing code in a drum head and still not sound decent. But you can also look at the results and of the wave file, which is just sort of, it has a tail, it has a certain noise profile, and you look at the average of all the sample seeds you can find, and you see that they're all within error margins of a certain sound area. So you can pretty much just apply that statistic to the bass level and then work around the bass signal and still get to the same result without having to simulate anything. But yeah, these are the kind of shortcuts that we're always sort of hunting for.
But when you simulate it, it gives you points where you can now insert like controls that you don't usually have, which is what Laudi is doing right now with the drum.
There's a new drum coming soon.
And a little bit also what makes the wobbler so interesting, because there is physical modeling in there.
But it's always trying to find the least amount of simulation that you can get away with to make it interesting and expressive and still have the sound good, because if you simulate to get the sound good, you're probably going to burn your fingers. So there's...
and have math work for you. The double pendulum is definitely math working for us. And in the... Oh my god, what's it called again? In the noise box, in the Fenix, the time versus...
Time, space and continuity.
That one. is a probability clouds.
It's literally tweaking with just probabilistic density clouds. Because if you're having a random thing happening, you can always have measure distribution, and then like a normal Gaussian curve, things are mostly happening in the middle, and sometimes they happen on the side of the middle or all the way at the end of the tails. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing it digitally, you can of course just draw that curve and then say, well, this is my probability curve, and give me results that form this curve. So for the noise box in the Fenix, we made something where you can edit that curve. You can just say, well, I want a flat curve, I want a beta curve, I want a Gaussian curve, or I want anything in between, or with binary choices, and then crossfade between all those. It's sort of cooking the books for beginners. No, not for beginners, just
What do you mean cooking the books?
You're going to roll dice, and you know ahead of time exactly what the distribution of numbers is that you're going to get, even if you don't know the actual numbers, but you can just sort of do the magic trick, and it will be good eventually.
Averaged over events.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's I think in a very simple way, it's a tiny simulation of what your events are gonna actually pan out like. All models are simulations of reality, and this is a very flattened one on which you can have lots of events. So, statistics. Yeah, it makes music.
Yeah, statistics and physics and a lot of you need to analyze a lot of things. But like, is there a chance we can look at the violin just to understand like how do you analyze it?
But mostly I spend a lot of time physically measuring things.
Why is this dead? There's a crack in the thing somewhere.
The holes are cracked.
Oh, okay.
But specifically the things I was looking at with this thing is that, there's these strings and they're coupled there, and the behavior of a string is relatively straightforward. There's you excite here something, and the waves start traveling both sides, and if they hit the edge, then the edge will have some filtering effect where it transfers some of the energy into the body, but most of it reflects, and same here. But then specifically this whole tiny thing with the poles, this is I think it's called the bridge. This has a very nice bundling shape. It funnels all the vibrations from the strings into these two legs, and there are very nicely contained points that insert these vibrations into the whole resonating body. So I was measuring where all those things were exactly, and drawing out the shape, and making air transport and making wave transport through solid wood to see how to actually make it sound good.
But how would you
what do you mean, Eric? I lost you there. I understood what you said about like how the waves basically get to here, and then they enter inside.
Yeah, so the vibrations of these strings they end up on these legs.
Yeah.
And from there they start radiating on the wood.
Yeah.
And in the air in the inside. So the underside is also going up and down. So this whole air volume inside is sort of compressing and contracting, expanding all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But that sort of radiates from the center and then bounces from the edges, and that sort of goes into infinity loop inside until it finally exits through the air holes. And what was really nice to see after enough simulation is that the entire shape of this thing is really taking every frequency, and each frequency ends up interfering somewhere on this edge here. Mm-hmm. And the shorter corners are for the higher frequencies, and the longer corners are for the lower frequencies, and they're all made exactly so whatever happens with those, it gets sort of lensed into these holes. So there's sort of two highways of energy flowing through the violin that bundle everything exactly through these F holes. And the F holes actually have to be this wide, otherwise they would miss a bit of the frequency area. It could really sort of tape certain areas from here to make an equalizer out of hardware.
Yeah.
So that's what it was doing with...
How do you simulate something like this? So you obviously researched acoustic instruments and how they're actually designed, but how do you simulate something like this? What do you mean by I simulated this?
By simulating this virtual world with enough fine-grained detail, you can have this virtual violin in your computer and then say, well, what happens if I insert sound there? Can I then visualize how this sound is flowing through this device?
So you say you measured it from this, but I would expect to see some sort of sensor on it then.
No,
There's nothing.
No, I measured it. I just had to have measurement with distances.
Oh, okay. So you could sort of rebuild it virtually.
Yeah. So when you say you simulated it, is it like in C++?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're just seeing numbers. You're not seeing there's no visual representation rather than just numbers.
Also that.
Well, there is. You can actually see the whole airwaves flowing like wavefronts real-time visualized. So I'll show this to you.
So you basically create a simulation, a visual simulation of the code, so you could really analyze it.
So then I can also. It wasn't fast enough for audio real time, but it's definitely fast enough for real time, just 30 frames per second to draw a different body shape to see how, if I change this shape, how does this affect the sound? And if I change the whole shape, how does that affect the sound? So you can, even if the simulation is not that great and probably wrong on so many levels, I can, by tweaking that simulation, I've already learned a lot about the real thing anyway. Just, it's almost like reframing reality for yourself, so you can draw more conclusions about it, or at least find out how your preconceptions are wrong.
Yeah.
And then you find out by the model that the shape of the violin is a perfect shape for this kind of sound production.
You could optimize it. You could take away the notches. You could take this thing away. This is ergonomically bullshit. It has to be rotated. There's so many things you can change about this to make it better and still sound like a violin.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't need to be wood at all. It can just be plastic.
Plastic violins now.
Yeah, there are plastic violins now. They sound great. So also these tuners. What are they thinking? It's There's never really been a product design step around the violin, because this has evolved with the tools that were available back then, and these days we have much more technology at our disposal to do something like this. But now we're all so used to seeing exactly this thing on stage and in concert halls that it's unlikely to go away.
So you analyze something like this, and then what instrument comes from this? I bet that this is really inspiring. You discover a lot of new things, and then you say, okay, I'm gonna put a few knobs, connect them, and make a synth. What synth comes out of this research?
Well, not the Fenix, because that's too analog still to actually use the models that are in here. But one of the things that did come out of here is something that ended up in the Reverb plugin. It's not a plugin. It's also a plugin, but it's also a physical module in the Fenix. The Reverb model uses a bunch of simulated early reflections to sort of you snap your fingers and the first sound bounce from the rooms that has a certain pattern and a certain flavor to it. And by doing this, I learned enough about how all this reflection goes on to put proper reflections inside that reverb. But it's so the synthesizer from this is yet to come, and that's already in the works. And
it's in the Fenix already.
But
we're planning to take it out of the Fenix and give it its own life as well.
Right.
Next year.
Like a standalone or a module.
Well, within Eurorack.
Eurorack.
Maybe even standalone.
The reverb.
Also.
The reverb. But the synthesizer is going to be part of the Big Fish keyboard.
That is also, which is another project. So things or part of things end up in, other things. Yeah.
But also the exploration phase needs to be wide enough, so by the time you're actually building something, you just, I have this, and this would work nice with this, because we've already tried it. And then, So this is part of the ongoing experiments.
So do you have rituals and routines that you always do?
Always do.
Well, usually you get out of bed at 12.
Yeah, I work at night. I get out of bed at 12. That's not really a ritual, it's just a rhythm.
Yeah, but I guess working at night, I think, is very important for you. Because it's quiet and no distractions.
Yeah, no distractions, middle of the night. There's one thing that's always happening. It's high quality progress bars. That's a bit of a ritual.
High quality progress bars.
Yes, because that's at some point in the process I always end up making things that take way too long to compute, and then spending a bit of time making the waiting more pleasant is something I always do.
So just for yourself?
Yes, just for myself. Just any process, something with, or the logs that scroll past have to be really fancy, or there has to be some...
Tell. Can you show me?
I don't have anything actually running right now. Well, one of the things, the Fenix firmware upgrade is, it really shows you every file with a tiny scroll bar and a little disk drive icon when you update. So instead of just some LED blinking and you have to just wait until it magically it's done, we try and make a tiny experience of it, and then it feels like there's something going on and you're never uncertain that it's still going.
It also tends to build the software that you build the thing in. So.
Well, that I understand from these explanations. It's not,
So
it's a lot of the tools to make the Fenix we did ourselves, and I was initially even going to do the circuit board design tools myself, but that didn't go fast enough, and KiCad got good fast enough that I thought that, well, it's pointless to try and compete with KiCad, or KiCad, not sure how people pronounce it. But I think you earlier already asked about how the hell did we do this.
Yeah.
Part of it is, of course, software.
What I was curious to understand is like when I see something like the Fenix,
Yes.
it's a beast.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
like I mean, you guys live in Amsterdam. It's basically like a manufacturing house in the middle of Amsterdam. It's not really something you would expect a small company, to do. Like, this is something that maybe, I don't know, Moog can do, or
Yes.
like really, like, you have people, you have a manufacturing space, you have like things, and then you could also invest in research to do something like this.
It's interesting you phrase it like this, because I would think that Moog would never burn their fingers at something like this. You have to be an independent, crazy person to even contemplate starting this. So,
I guess what I'm asking is because, like, the investment in something like this, the risk you're taking, like, will people buy this? I need to now spend so much money, so much time to actually build something that, like, modules, I totally see how people come up with wild ideas for modules. Like, I can make everything from PCB, get it from China, make a run of 20 and sell them. It's like, that's a fun hobby.
Yeah.
It's like this.
Yeah. So first of all, even though we are sort of art first driven, so design, the need for it to exist mostly comes from him, and that must exist first before we consider building it at all. So it's not money first, because especially in Eurorack there are a few like holes in the market that for you would not be that difficult to fill, and probably money could be made. But that's money first design, and even though we're not a foundation, so money is important, but it's the second consideration. And I think that's also when making a Fenix, the first consideration is, yes, we should be doing this. We want to be doing this.
Does this need to exist?
Does this need to exist? And if we were especially working with Bert and Felix, it was just such a great story and coming together of, starting with the Fenix II, which is down here, by the way. We have one of Bert's Fenix II, of which there is a lot in the 4.
There's some stuff hidden everywhere.
Yeah.
Allow me to not break. Yeah, that is not clever. Let me just move this from here, because we don't have.
If anything breaks, we have repair tools.
You think? Yeah. So we were talking about the Fenix II.
Yeah, this is the Fenix II.
How old is this guy?
2010 or something.
10, yeah, but this is his, so this is maybe a little bit earlier.
Yeah, a little bit earlier.
Oh.
Do we need to move the power supply otherwise? We also do that.
No, I think it's okay. I moved it from there. Yeah.
From just sort of loving that, and that hooked into conversations we were having before, that the great thing about Eurorack as a system is that it's, like you just said, it's easier to experiment in it, and everyone can have their own little freaky thing that they want, and you can build your own instrument from it. That immediately also makes the drawback that you have very little virtuosos of modular synth, because they keep changing their own instrument. And
You have very
very little virtuosos, so really good players.
virtuosos. Yeah. Funny enough, a small anecdote. When I started with modular, like it was about 4 years ago, I said that I'm going to create a system. I'm going to change the system every time based on an architecture. I'm going to take a piece of architecture. I'm going to design a system, design a patch, then go shoot video there of that location, as if this was like an art project that I was working on.
Okay.
It was a drastic failure. A drastic failure simply because like the virtuosi of like really playing something professionally, you have to invest time in it. You cannot just like, I'm just gonna move this here, and now I'm gonna start playing. Like you cannot make music like this.
No.
That's what I like so much about this, because then this is really an instrument that was designed by a person for a specific way of using, and you could abuse that way of using. But like you get used to it. It's like I know a guitar by heart because I've been playing it for 25 years.
Exactly.
So it's the same thing with something like this. That is like, this is, it's not even like a make noise system that is like, like the shared system that is like, you can buy it like this, but then you could also rephrase it.
Yeah,
this is unrephrasable.
No,
It's like, this is it. This is an instrument.
We decided for you.
Yeah.
This is what you need. Yeah. Of course, it does talk to modular synth, so you can expand it on the outside. But yeah, and then, so the Fenix II really had that instrument level of a modular.
And it also got a kind of bit of cult status because of it, because people really got sounds out of it that they not really got out of other systems because of the transient nature of all these modules. So originally I saw that in the Fenix II and I really liked that about it. And the risk is indeed, will people have enough money to buy it all in one go? Mm-hmm. But if people like a wall of modular, then I don't have much doubt that they're going to like a Fenix. So it's all the same. It
is an assumption.
True.
It is a really big assumption, because then then you could argue that then they really pick their own modules and it's like a playful thing, and you're like, no, you have to buy a whole system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seems to me like this is a bit like, it would make me really anxious. Like, would people really do that?
Well, it's commitment. This is commitment.
It's yeah.
But it's also because we basically removed the option for people to choose their modules. It's up to us to make it a really interesting set.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we went out of our way to really put variety in there. Like there's almost nothing is there twice. So if there's 3 oscillators, of course they're all 3 different oscillators. They're not even, well, one is digital, one is analog and digital. So that they're all spreading the range. Same with the filters. There's 4 filters. They're all completely different topologies. 1/2 of them are digital. There's a vocal filter. There's a formant filter. Vocal and formant are almost the same. There's a vocoder and there's a digital analog simulation thing. So every bit there is sort of, we chose something, so it will always have at least one of the more interesting versions of everything on there. So you'll never be really disappointed if you ever get the cassette. Why didn't that include? Well, it's there. So that was at least one way of risk mitigation, which of course put the risks in time, because it takes more time to develop all that.
And it puts the risk somewhere else, because then some people make choices to have a certain kind of synthesis, certain kind of system.
Yeah.
So you're telling them, well, no.
If you want 2 of these oscillators, you buy 2 Fenixes.
All choices are choices, and all choices have consequences. Yeah. But I always felt like, even starting from sort of the genius of the Fenix II, and knowing that both Stijn and Naudi have spent each one of them more than 2 decades developing digital parts, and we've just had a few years of experience manufacturing electronics with our small modules, small compared to the Fenix. We thought, well, we can do this. If we can, therefore we should. Yeah. There's always a risk in that's why it's entrepreneurship, and that's.
But this is also we got here with Superbooth. Like we designed the whole thing.
That was a real go moment.
Yeah. We went to Superbooth 2019 with that prototype, actually.
Yeah. Not all of it fully functional.
Yeah.
But enough to show this is what we want to make. Yeah. This is what we want to do.
And with an empty pre-order list, we just got there, and if nobody signs up, we're just not doing this. And we got home with 60 pre-orders.
60 pre-orders.
Yeah.
Well, we had an open waiting list.
Open waiting list, not pre-orders, but 60 people had signed up for wanting a Fenix after that first weekend.
In the 2 weeks before Superbooth, Stijn hand-soldered all of it.
Hand-soldered all of it.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of like tiny
parts.
SMD.
Yeah,
components.
4,500.
4,500.
That was a lot of.
That's like that's like
That's the bleeding fingers category.
Lego.
Right?
Like we could consider this like 4,000 Lego pieces for adults.
Yeah.
And then I guess a day before, the phaser literally exploded.
So this area just big smoke coming out on the
This was before like when you talked to DivKid, like a day
before. Yeah.
Like
so we just sat there sawing out the tiny area and we hacked in one of the other earlier prototypes. We just sort of stuck it a bit behind there so nobody would see that it's actually. But we made it work.
That was one of the parts that did work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a Frankenstein.
There's all kinds of stuff that's been taken out and put in, and wires everywhere on the inside. So from the first prototype, you still have to do a lot of work to get to an actual manufacturing ready version. Like this is one big circuit board. This is not how you manufacture anything in bulk because the pick and place machine is like this wide at most. So you can already see here that we made some break lines in the Fenix where we thought that this sheet would come off, this sheet would come off, and this sheet would come off. So this is already 3 big ones and 2 through-hull only parts. This turned out still to be too big because there's still risk if one area is really beyond repair, then you have to throw away the whole thing. So we cut it again in 2 areas, here and here, I think. Or here, yeah. But then, of course, you get the startup cost at every board. You have to sort of make a separate order, make orders, custom PCBs and everything else. But then we come to how we made this fast. And if you see all these outlines here, these are not just drawn in artwork because we like an outline around stuff. These are actually separate eagle or dip trace or keycap designs. So each of these areas is actually a separate file. And I wrote the software to actually combine those into this bigger board and make sort of meta blocks that we could just drag the meta blocks around and then connect those up in much simpler, faster fashion. So the noise box here, this tiny area, is it also somewhere here? Yeah, here's the same-ish thing, different version, so everything is moved around. But I could literally just update the standalone version and it would be kept in sync with the big version. And we could both work on these individually. So all of these, either Laudi or I did a separate design. And then this one is instanced 3 times because we needed 3 mixers. So it's really trying to automate as much of the workflow as possible and also automate all the validation. So if this block works, then inside here is fine. And we know it has a certain interface to the outside, just like computer programs and SDKs have interfaces and APIs. We made a sort of mini API for each of these blocks to interface with the whole. And then on a higher level, we could just connect those dots together and then be certain that it would just work all over.
And was this the idea from the beginning? Was there like I mean, it seems like you had to make some assumptions and probably like a lot of failure in the process to get to the point where you can actually like sort of streamline it. Because it's like you need to.
I think many things come from frustrations with the current.
Do you remember
options.
if someone is crazy enough to do this now and like they're really inspired by this and like, oh, I need to make my own. I need to make my own thing like this so big. Yeah. What advice would you give them?
Spend time.
Do not start.
Well, no. Actually, by all means, go for it. But spend time on making a proper toolchain that you can do these kind of stunts where you can actually design these things individually without affecting the whole. Because this story doesn't end here because the whole front panel is procedurally generated from the PCB. So every time I change anything here, I just press a button and a new file for the printer comes out. The manual is updated. Everything is one big script.
What?
Yeah.
What?
This is such a big project. I will make mistakes. And I know this about myself, so I make codes for it that can't make mistakes.
You guys should see my face. I'm like what the fuck? Like, okay. I guess it makes sense. Right, what did I expect? It makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, how can you do something? Like, how can you... This is a huge undertaking. Like you have to have the tools for it, and no one created the tool for this. You have to create the tools.
So, but don't be afraid to create those tools, because you know what you need. And then, I need this button. Well, build the button. Okay, you can build this. You can also build a tool. That's
automate whatever you can as soon as you can.
Yeah.
And especially automate your validation if you can, to make if you can have a system sort of keep a check on you, like, you know, this is you've missed some routing here, connecting to the rest of the boards, or this is electrically not going to work. Then by all means do, because otherwise it's, you know.
This also
so
resulted
much to keep in your own head.
It has resulted in interesting bugs as well. We almost got bitten by it, but we also got helped out by it.
Accidentally something got better?
Yeah, accidentally something got better. Because it's one big PCB. This is how I designed it. So on my screen, I would have this huge thing, except that the insides were empty because that was merged in afterwards in the post-processing step. So I was just looking at this and pretty much say, well, the jacks go here, and these modules are there, and the knobs are roughly there, like the knobs are roughly there. But for the factory, of course, we need all these separate components. So one of the post-processing tools I wrote is something that takes these edges and makes separate board files out of those, and makes separate bill of material files for each of the areas, and then generates a massive folder with all these individual work packages for the factories. Like, this board needs all these components, this board needs this. And now it's correct, but I made one mistake early on. So all the resistors were sort of off by 1 in the reference designators at some point. Mm-hmm. Bit shame. Most of them went okay, but we the first beta units came back with, like, on these 4,000 components, 100 mystery components were wrong. So I just stared, okay, which one can be wrong? I know it is wrong, but can I reproduce my bug correctly enough that I know which one exactly? So eventually we found all of them except one. And then we were testing it with a production test jig. There's also a whole story on that. But the beta board we got back sounded better than the one we brought as a reference. It turned out that one of these resistors that was actually from the bug was just a better value for this envelope component. So, okay, whatever that one is, can you do this again, please? We have no clue. Just measure whatever they put on the board. Okay, keep it. This is fine. So yeah, on the one hand, build systems, test them before we go to the factory, but and then things will go wrong anyway. And then, but don't throw away the errors straight away, because you know, who knows what you might find. Yeah. But that's been across the whole project. So you try a whole bunch of stuff, you do everything you think you need to do, and then it goes wrong anyway, and then you come up with a design solution that is beyond what you ever expected to make in the first place. So.
But I do feel like as soon as you have something where you're like, oh, yes, I think this is it, make it. Because physicality has its own many challenges. Reality is obstinate. So, and you will just run into things that you haven't considered, and you can't consider everything. So just get to that as fast as you can. I don't like the run fast and break stuff idea, but as soon as you think, okay, I think this is all I have to say about this, then have it made, or make it yourself, or just put it in reality, or put it in virtual reality, but wherever you want it to eventually live, get it there as fast as you can, and then have yourself or other people try and use it. Yeah. And see that as part of your plan, and that the first time that is probably not going to completely work out the way you think. That's just, that's normal.
Another piece of the procedural puzzle. This is, of course, the whole Fenix, and down here are all the jacks. And they're on different PCBs than all the modules. So to connect all the modules to their respective jacks, we have this interconnect board, which sits somewhat like this. Not exactly the same version, but it connects everything together. But one of the things that the scripts also did was generate the whole schematic for this board, so I cannot make routing mistakes or wiring mistakes. So the right jack is always connected to the right module without me having to think about it anymore. So this is just convenience after you have all the scripts running.
There is of course a bigger risk that if you make a mistake in your parameters of your system, then it's all gonna be screwed.
But luckily, those are, because everything is screwed.
Then you notice.
It's easy, yeah. One thing screwed is usually it's a bigger problem.
Yeah.
So, where is the sentence coming from?
This is from Doctor Who. This is Doctor Who realizing he's not a good or a bad man. He's just an idiot. This is Doctor Who in general has been kind of an inspiration for
Doctor Who, yeah. Doctor Who's our vibe.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about inspiration. I remember we were talking on Discord, and Ziffer was asking a question, and you were like, you referenced the video of a Japanese guy explaining how a ball jumps from the water.
Oh yeah.
And you said, I watch a video like this, I get 4 ideas for modules. Like, let's talk about this a little bit.
Well, there's just so many beautiful patterns in almost anything in nature. The same with the violin and the simulation thing. Once you just carefully look at all these interactions going on everywhere, then I see waveforms that I haven't seen in a waveform editor yet. Yeah.
You see waveforms that you haven't seen.
Yeah, like the whole simulation thing that you or if you have your finger through a box of water, you see all these swirls and chaos going on, and there's definitely a periodicity in it, so it means it must have a tone, but it's subsonic, but it's a tone. So if you speed it up, what would it sound like? And if you take a slice out of this way or slide out of it that way, and your finger goes through the water back and forth, I have no clue. But it shows more chaos and swirls and things in there than most synthesizers allow you to do. So that's again that one video of the guy with the water ball. It's also about fish swimming and turbulence around behind fishtails and
the little vortexes.
Yeah, all the vortexes. Yeah. So just looking at the mathematics in there, sometimes these mathematical simplifications already show enough beautiful intricacy that I think it must sound amazing, but nobody's ever listened to it yet. So that there's a lot of inspiration there, which is of course how we got to the wobbler. The whole point of the wobbler originally was to make double pendulums audible or at least usable. For the people who don't know what a double pendulum is, it's like you have a stick hanging somewhere, and then from the end of the stick you have hanging a second stick, so it's sort of loosely hanging on the underside. But if you give it enough of a kick, it becomes unpredictable. So it's the smallest system you can build that shows fractal and chaotic motion. But it's unpredictable, but it's not unexpected, if that makes sense.
Still feels natural.
But it's always within a certain boundary that it's being random. So it's almost everything that we have in acoustic instruments, like a piano string. Like a piano is usually 2 or more strings being hit by a hammer, and these strings interact, so they have a sort of double pendulum interaction inside the strings already towards each other. Modeling the entire piano string is quite difficult. Modeling a single double pendulum we can do. So taking the inspiration from, again, the smallest possible mathematical system we can take away and simulate and make usable, and ended up in as the core concept around which we built the rest of the wobbler. So I think that's sort of the. Does that answer the question? What was the question?
Well, the question was about inspiration, and I think that people would probably be, probably professionals who are watching this or not, but I bet that a lot of people would think that the inspiration comes from music. But rather, it could come from music, but I think that the more interesting and out there ideas, they don't necessarily come from music, they just come from nature, from physics, from just being curious about a certain phenomena.
Yeah.
And you look at it and go ahead.
If I would be inspired by music itself, that music already exists. So if I'm going to try and help out an artist go places that I didn't expect and he didn't expect, I better come up with something that hasn't been done yet. And then luckily these are everywhere. But there is
it's literally everywhere around you.
Yeah.
But it's a lens thing. I mean, to you, everything is physics, and then especially the physics of audio is very familiar to you. So when you see that vortex water interaction, you think, oh, what would this sound like? That is not a very obvious question to have in your mind, but for him it is. So it's taking your way of how you understand the world and then making that work for you, putting that in the work.
And at some point it becomes at the level, if I was a paint maker and I find a new color blue, and if it's very strange, all these artists are painting, but I've never seen blue. Let's see what they will do if I give them blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there was a moment in time in 1,000 years ago that they came up with purple.
Yeah.
And it was really exciting to come up with purple because it was so it was not something you can. I mean, nature can produce purple, but we cannot produce nature. We cannot produce purple.
Yeah. So that feels a bit like the same, that I'm still sort of digging through all these weird colors that. Well, yeah, musical colors that nobody's ever seen yet, and it's up to me to select them and package them nicely and make them usable, because a lot of these algorithms or mathematical structures are not by themselves in a musical form yet. So it becomes the challenge to tame them, or
to tame them, to kind of shape it, to turn it into something musical is a whole different ballgame. But getting the inspiration from physics, is your background in physics?
I don't have, I did 1 year of physics, so technically I'm not sure if that counts as a background.
Little bit.
And I already went into physics to find out why violin sounded nice.
Why audio?
So my background.
Do you have formal education?
One year of physics.
Literally, this is your formal education is 1 year of physics.
Yes.
Okay.
The rest is self-taught. He's taught at universities. Applied universities.
Yeah, that we discussed, right? Was it in Utrecht?
But he hasn't actually.
Hogeschool Utrecht.
Also
Universiteit Utrecht also, and lessons
So
all
he's
over the
taught
place.
there. He hasn't actually graduated.
I dropped out because there was this thing. Most teachers were there for teaching, and no longer for the love of physics. And the guy that did have the love for physics left for Stanford.
He's now back. He's currently our Minister of
Science
Education.
and Education.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my first year teacher, and he was amazing. He turned out to have Rietveld art school background as well. So he was art and physics, which was my perfect blend. But then he left, and I said, well, everybody else here is boring. Mom, Dad, I'm going to drop out. Can I have some money for books? Because I will keep learning, but not there. That's what happened. So I had a big pile of books, and a year later I was already teaching audio design at some other school with the stuff I learned.
This is also the period where you, being a programmer, and everybody that was teaching you had no idea what computers were doing. So that's a gigantic mismatch. Yeah. So I can do much more than you can. Why are you teaching me?
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, that all makes sense. So we talked a little bit about the Fenix, but this was not the first. Like you mentioned, you actually had quite a lot of experience releasing products, digital products.
Yeah.
DSP, VST. What were the first things that you actually launched to the world and said this is mine?
Yeah. Well, VST and it was actually sort of initially VST was not a thing yet. As in Cubase made something that was effects only, but we were back then in the first tracker software that allowed plugins.
Cubase is like Ableton, but like really long time ago.
It just released a new version.
Sorry, Cubase people. Sorry.
No, I don't use Cubase either. But halfway in the 90s, Jescola Buzz was released, and it was a tracker. Like they have this almost Excel sheet style entering of notes, and you can, if you're handy with touch typing, you can enter melodies and stuff really, really fast. So compared to piano roll editing, it's just lightning speed. So I was using that to make music, and it came with all the programming files you needed to make your own plugins. So because it was not really open source, but freeware and open community, you could just take the API and make a plugin. And with places like Cubase, you had to sign away your soul and blood and whatever in NDAs and everything. But this is just open. You just get the file. So, oh, hey, let's see what this does. And you start typing something. This sounds horrible. and then you learn about how to do it better. And there was a very active chat room around it, which is still active decades later. And that's also where I met Laudi. That's also in the Fenix. And a whole bunch of other DSP programmers started in this tiny community for Jazz Club Buzz, making instrument and effect plugins that run on a Pentium 1, I think, was the computer we had back then. So 100 megahertz, 133 megahertz. And from there, I was commissioned to make the curriculum software for audio design at the Hogeschool van Utrecht, make a modular synthesizer so students could practice sound design on an actual designable system instead of doing it on paper, which I had to do before, or only in the schoolroom.
This is a physical?
No.
No, it's a digital modular synth. Okay.
Digital modular synth.
But wasn't there like back then the Nord and like other?
Yeah, but the school then had one. They had 120 students, and they all had to do homework.
Okay.
So they wanted something that they could just give the students to do the homework at home and learn these things without everybody having to pay thousands of guilders to have these machines.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't even their primary course. It was media technology. So they had game design, they had system design, and then at some point they also had some audio. So there was big investment per student wasn't impossible. They just asked me to build him a system, and it interestingly ended up with us having a giant row about how synthesizers worked.
With the teacher.
With the teacher that was giving me this commission. Because he wanted me to implement things in a certain way. Because synthesizers work like this. He said, no, I built these things. They don't. This is how they work. I mean, I've just built it. Why are you complaining? But after some shouting back and forth, he said something like, if you think you know everything, why are you not in front of this class? She said, oh, okay. So next week I was in front of 120 students going, hello. Most of them being older than I was. Trying to explain synthesis, and he was coaching me to be a better teacher while I was teaching the students, and that ended up in a great cooperation for the next few years. Still being a freelancer everywhere else, but I was also a guest lecturer at the school. That collapsed for various organizational reasons.
Organizational, budgetary reasons.
Yeah, there was basically no budget anymore for external people. But the synthesizer lives on, and that specific modular synthesizer, it started in 2002 now, and the codebase is still alive, and I'm finally reviving a lot of it for the project after Fenix, because we are going after the Nord modular. We want to make a keyboard with software modular inside, with a nice editor where you just connect the screen and keyboard and edit it in the device. And sort of bring 100 Fenixes with you instead of one.
Right. So that's the next step.
That's the next
ridiculous
big thing.
project.
Yeah.
Ridiculous project.
Yeah. The next 4 years probably. Yeah. Meanwhile, we're doing modules, and we have some other spin-off modules coming and new modules coming.
Yeah.
But the big thing is going to be the Big Fish, which has all this stuff built in.
But the big, I mean, maybe it's not called the Big Fish. The
no,
small one that I saw, like
the Big Fish.
No, like on Instagram, I saw like a while back.
That was goldfish.
Goldfish.
Yeah. And the raspberry fish.
And this one is really for educational purposes, isn't it?
No, well, it's also. I think there should be no difference. Same with the Fenix. It's laid out so clear that if I want to explain synthesis to anyone, of course I put them behind the Fenix. It should be simple.
Yeah.
I have one of our customers has 3 or how many did he end up
I think
with?
3 or 4.
And he opened the music school with that. He was like, I've been wanting to do this for some time now. This is the perfect instrument to do this with. I want a bunch, and he opened a music school with that. Yay!
Yeah. And it is here in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And he's just working with 3 Fenixes.
Yeah, I think
3 or 4.
Like he started with 1 for himself, and then he came up with this idea. And he asked for 7. I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, good. Oh. Yeah.
I think he ended up with 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Is it here in Amsterdam?
No.
No.
So,
okay.
Almost against the German border.
Oh, okay. Okay. Cool.
But
That's really good.
So the Big Fish itself, it's going to be educational for everybody. So not just for in education, but if you open it up and you have the editor in front of you, if you have a filter, well, of course there's hundreds of different filters, and the eventual plan is to have all of them. And you click on it, you get the full history of why this filter and comparisons against other filters and easy ways to listen to all of them. I think that should be in there because we have it. We want to make it all open source. We want to give all the algorithms for everybody to look at because they're just as interesting as the use of them musically.
But also, as many people, how they use the Nord is just as a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
So there are going to be like 4 layers of interaction, but each layer you can ignore the other ones if you're not interested in that. So you can just play it as a synthesizer and not open up, the architecture of how this particular sound works. That's fine. Or you can have like sound banks of other people have made synthesizers loaded in there.
Yeah.
You bought it's not even the Nord modular, it's a Nord lead, and after 4 or 5 years it still had the factory settings it comes with.
Yeah.
So the other person was really using it and was getting a lot of enjoyment out of it, and he makes music with it, but he just never went beyond.
That's actually how, there is a Nord over there, right?
Yeah.
It's a Nord lead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I used to play that, like, when we used to play jazz, like, this was one of the main instruments that people have. Like, professional would have that. But no one talked about the Nord modular. They were just like, this sounds really, really good.
But even as a synthesizer, none of the factory sounds had anything changed.
Yeah.
Ha!
but that's
fine. That's
before,
a kind of user. That's okay.
Yeah, like actually, most people that before I went into this space, like most people that I knew were musicians, they would not go into this space.
Yeah.
I think that what happens now is because this becomes so accessible and becomes more trendy in the past, 5 years, I guess. Then people go into like synthesis, and I do remember like when I did my graduation project, I was working with people from the conservatory in The Hague. And producer Vid Achacic, he's a producer that we're still friends. He was working on his graduation project and we worked together. And I was using the MS-2000 from Korg, and I used the preset. He was like, dude, you do not work with a preset.
Yeah.
You make your own sound.
You need to,
you have to make your own sound. Here, this is how a filter works. Like, okay. Let me dive into this. It was a lot of fun back then. But before that, it was like, for me, it was like, there are people who make instruments and there are people who play instruments. I mean, this was like maybe 10 years ago, so it's...
And we want, because for yourself, you want to have one where you can have all of the layers that he's comfortable with.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten into the last layer yet.
Okay.
Can
I give it?
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
I was angry. But, in a way that it does still support sort of the last layer. I don't want it to sound negative, because that's where a lot of musicians live. You don't have to...
I think most of them. That's okay. If someone is designing a cello, they design a cello, and some of that, like, I just want to practice the cello.
Cello, only one preset.
It's only 4 strings.
Yeah.
It's really big and bulky, and it does only one sound.
But like we have now, what you would have, like sound designers, they're at the level where you tweak with making the sound, but you don't take it into the performance of making music. That's also fine.
But the sound designer also doesn't make the synthesizer. That's yet another layer in there. So
and then
we have 3 layers
writing
now.
the programming that builds the whole thing.
Exactly. That's the last one.
Yeah.
Because of course I have a programming environment in which I program these new algorithms. And for the Big Fish, because it's such a computational powerhouse, I want the programming environment to be in there as well. So every block you click on, you can actually see the entire code of it, change it live, just listen how it sounds directly.
Who do you design this for?
Me. No, that's...
do you design everything for yourself? Isn't there like a certain point that you're like, okay, I'm designing it for this particular...
First and foremost...
I could point slightly to this side, because this is what I designed the Fenix for. This is Mr. Ottpin. a really good musician. Oh yeah.
Allow me, my friends.
Yeah, this is a tiny robot.
Yeah.
This is a pin from Mr. Ott. Ott is an amazing musician. Takes years to make albums, and they're all super intricate and well connected and well thought out and just sound amazing. So at the beginning of the Fenix, because it's a huge project, huge undertaking, should we do this? Even before we went to Super Booth with the waiting list and didn't go, no go. But who are we making this for? We were at the big music festival, sort of standing there on the main stage, listening to it. Yeah, I'm going to make it for him. I know exactly what he needs. just hold my beer. We're going to build him a machine.
He has one.
He has one. Yeah.
He's very happy with it.
This was really how you gave yourself the constraint.
Yeah, or the reverse of constraint.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think it's more his permission.
Because
it's not just, okay, I'm building this for you, but it's more of if I can give you something that allows you to make music this way or in a better way, then I feel I've done something doing worthwhile. I think it's more that kind of, so it's more permission than...
Yeah.
But you have to have a target to do it for.
Yeah. So, because indeed, it's kind of an extreme sport, making good sounds and then using them musically in a relevant way. Because some sort of coffee table bleeps and bloops, well, you can make that. That's also an interesting object for a few minutes. But somebody that makes music for the ages, I don't know many people that would use a modular for that directly. We've met a bunch of them since Fenix. But that's sort of, okay, I need to have one person that I know would use this machine, and that was just him.
Yeah.
And
I'm also happy. I know a few Fenixes are in beautiful home studios of people who make music for themselves or sound, never produce a damn thing to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
That is
also fine.
I don't mind that either. It feels very intimate while at the same time being super distant. I've made this thing that is a very intimate process for you. And we've made that for you now. Go have fun. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So that's the reverse of this is going to end up in something that is going to reach millions. But they won't ever know. The artist will know, but the people that he has a big reach with never know what instruments are being used, generally. So there's also that going on.
Yeah. And for Big Fish, I point at myself, I'm the target audience, at least for the building side of things. But it's such a meta thing, I'm building a meta modular for other sound designers to give to for other modular users, to give to sound designers, to give to players. So if I'm at the beginning of the chain and I can make people like me and me happy building the best blocks in the system, then the second layer is going to be happy in the third layer. So it seems like this time I should start there, and then the rest will be fine.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of other DSP programmers, a lot of them also academia, and most of that stuff strands in a paper, which is a bit sad, I think, because they write a paper about it and they publish it in some journal, and not even a single plugin ever appears from it that any musician can actually try what's in that paper. But if I have this really easy to live code platform that I can just give to one of these academics, so you've made a nice paper, would you like to try your own paper? Then of course they will implement that algorithm and hopefully share it with the rest of the world. And since we're all going open source anyway, then suddenly we have unlocked academia into musicians' hands. So that felt like a good place to go.
Yeah, a good goal to have. Yeah. Feels worthy.
Yeah. There's a lot of...
If I'm going to spend time on something, I should do something that would be meaningful. That sounds like something meaningful.
Yeah, just bridge science and art a bit more. Also unlock the beauty of the insights more to the people that otherwise would never find out. We have a whole bunch of artwork inside the Fenix. You already sent screenshots of you've made some pictures of that. But we are really proud of the code we wrote. We are really proud of the algorithms. We can't show anyone. So if you open it up and you click on it, you can actually see it. Okay, now we're talking. So then we can show the world more what we cared about instead of the pretty packaging, which is also important, but it's not where I spend 95% of my time.
Yeah.
So it's,
Are there any music instrument designers you really admire?
well, Bert and Felix, of course, from Synthon. Who else?
I don't know if that's from the inside, but I really like the guys from Dato. Just
Oh,
they
yeah.
made this really
Dato from
playful-
Utrecht.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They-
I really want to go to their offices, to their studio and workshop. Yeah, we're in
Yeah.
contact. Yeah.
yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
yes.
they made this super like easy to use, but often easy to use and playful means not deep enough. But this is actually usable. You get like really nice sounds from it. Really nice things from it instead of just beep beep and sort of ends there. Yeah.
Metro Modular from Sydney.
Yes.
That's,
yeah, but that's more. That's like from the appreciation on what it runs on.
Also,
lot.
yeah, also the at some point, well, everybody is always going on about Buchla and Moog, but the world didn't start there, and or the audio didn't start there. So there's a whole bunch of older patents and older devices that are completely forgotten. They may not sound as controllable or nice as a Moog filter or Buchla RPG or whatever, but there are all these ancient filter designs, and Metro Modular is one of the guys that goes into the history of all these things and builds the Eurorack modules of all the stuff that was there before the battle was won, and that I really admire.
It's completely analog as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's instead of transistor ladders, you get switched capacitor filters. With all these crazy things that, yeah, there was no transistor, so I had to do something, and they did. But it's no resistors or no capacitors or whatever they had. Every filter that he has a sort of weird historical limitation to it, and they sound unique.
Yeah.
And that's often lost these days. So I really admire what he's doing.
Making sound machines, of course.
Yes, and Laudy. Laudy has not released any of his own stuff
No,
yet.
but it's coming. It's gonna be
Yeah,
good.
Vashki modeler,
Yeah.
Vashki embedded, going to release something soon. Fenix was pretty much his first big foray into not working for a corporate anymore, but building his own thing. So now he's gained enough confidence to also release his own product. So soon, and making sound machines. They are our beta testers as well. We also know them from the same chat room, from the same Jazz Buzz chat room from way back. They're also coming out with their own first modules very soon now, and it comes from very music theory background. It's,
He
Yeah.
comes from like classical
Yeah.
musical education, and then worked for the movie film
Yeah.
production
Movie
what do you
score
call that?
production
Movie
house.
score. Yeah, he's a
spent
composer.
all day composing things and then sending it off to Eastern country to get it
So, as far
performed
as
by
I
orchestras.
get it, this is a beat pattern generator that generates offbeat patterns.
Yeah.
Kind
Okay.
of. Yeah.
Stopper
Kind
beats,
of.
like super groovy hip hop beats that are
Yeah,
all
yeah.
slightly off, but
Yeah.
correctly slightly off.
Correctly slightly off.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the early process of designing an instrument. I understand it comes like where the inspiration comes from, but then you need to, like, do you first of all write code, or do you first of all sketch on paper? Do you have like a diagram, like a notebook with like diagrams?
Ooh, well, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
I have all of that, but which first I don't know. One of the things, I could have something else. Sometimes there's just a component that triggers the whole thing. And in this case, is this tiny thing.
It's a screen.
It's a screen.
Yeah, it's a round screen. And of course, this is what I'm considering for the big fish. But then a part of the design
Yeah, we
process.
were talking about that on Discord, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of stuff like suddenly everything almost clicks into place. I look at the screen and say, oh, I can see the whole thing around this, and then
And then do you sketch it, or like,
last time I did sketch it by literally just putting it on here and putting the keypad in front and all the knobs around it where I think they should be. And and then wipe it away again. So okay, I'll get back to it in a proper design software later. But I think this might work.
So do you sketch in KiCad?
Affinity Designer if I'm doing the product sketch. Usually.
Right. Is that on this computer?
For the keyboard, I have Affinity with
for something else. Yeah. So I'm just curious, like if you could like open a couple of files, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah,
I think it would be really interesting to see.
But it's always somebody else also asked this. First there has to be a global understanding of what's roughly on there. Then I go into Affinity Designer and do a rough sketch of where I think everything should be. Then I make the electronics that pretty much follows that shape, and there's already some experience in there. Like the magic is always where to hide the chips. It's all the components are between the PCB and the front panel, but there's no obvious place where you'd say, well, there's a big fat microcontroller just sitting there.
Yeah.
So it's always I do the front panel, then I try to get it fitting, and then with great pain in my heart I sometimes adjust the design a bit because the chip really doesn't fit. But these days, mostly when I'm done in Affinity, it should fit.
Yeah. So you is this also part of the constraint that you give yourself, that it has to be only one PCB?
If it really doesn't fit, it doesn't fit, and we go to the second one. But for manufacturing purposes, this is just a nice way to contain it.
We aim to have it all that way.
Yeah, because now there's also no parts that you can accidentally touch, because most people have their Eurorake open half the time, so if something scratches or falls, you can't break anything. It's also automatic shielding of everything, because everything is between the front panel and copper planes, so it helps a tiny bit. And also, yeah, it's just a single manufacturing step. It's SMD parts. If you put them on a board, if I put them on this side, I would have to hand solder all the jacks. But if they're on the other side, this can go on a wave solder machine. It can be done automated. So ideally, all the parts fit on the same side as all the jacks and the knobs are. But it's depends.
Yeah. So not only you're designing the interface, like there are a lot of different things you need to take into account here. You need to think about, first of all, the user that's going to use it and enough space for thick knobs. But then you also need to think about the way that this is going to be manufactured and soldered by someone or by a machine, and like how do you make sure that it is actually something that is feasible. Like you don't need to spend now 2 hours on building one thing, because then it's not really
not economically feasible. Still worth it, but not.
It's another thing that you need to really consider, because then someone actually needs to do that. Otherwise, you just do it for yourself, which is another thing. It can be a lot of fun, but like this is a huge challenge. Because it's actually for manufacturing. You need to think about another layer of complexity that's added to it.
And I think a bunch of that is natural to you now, because we have experience in that already, and especially since the Phoenix, a lot more experience, more and more challenging than the little modules. But we discussed this. We were also involved in some like hacker spaces, hacker camps, that kind of thing. And we called the Kickstarter problem. It is just a completely different world to make one than to manufacture.
Yeah.
Your prototype and what we call then a golden prototype is the one is challenging what you want to make, if it's feasible to make at all. And the other one is, and now can I have it made?
From feasible, is it possible to make?
Yeah.
And how to make it.
But so the one tests your concept, will the circuit work, will I actually like it, blah, blah, blah. And then you need a second test. So now can I redesign this if necessary in order to be manufactured? It's an entirely different challenge. Yes, certainly.
And with the Phoenix, we already knew in advance that this is not the way to manufacture this kind of thing.
So involved. Oh my god.
There's just too many test points to do everything, so we made it relatively heavy on human testing in the end. We have a whole bunch of specific test jigs to test for various things,
Yeah, maybe you can show this thing
Yeah,
here.
that one and these three. One relatively simple test is to see if this thing actually connects what it says it should connect. So this fits on here and slots in, and it just lights up everything that connects properly. And if it doesn't, there's a light off, and somebody has to go in and fix whatever is wrong. So this was we designed the test board and used it for one afternoon, and then the test is obsolete because we're only going to test 100 things. This is just really throw away, one off. Then a more involved one is this one. This, do I have a jack board? There was a jack board here.
Well,
Oh, shit. Here a board with all the jacks goes on, and a cable plugs in, and every jack has to be tested to see if it's mechanically okay. So somebody has to go and plug it all in, and the screen will tell you which jacks have not worked, or if it's defaulting action is okay or not, or yeah. And the same there. But at some point we had a really weird problem where some of these jacks, even after testing, they were still failing. So we made a second testing that we could test after it's been screwed onto the front panel. We can plug in the test board there and the screen on the back and see what the difference was. And it turned out that if it was soldered wrong here and the ring was pulled too tight, it would pull the plastic up, which would break the inside of the jack. But you have to build these test jigs to even find out that this could actually happen.
yeah,
And
that's
then
not very good.
during a project like this, you find out the new ways that things can go wrong every day. And the biggest test jig. Hier is vast aan. Toch op terug.
Ja, dit moet je laten liggen. Ik kan de camera.
Ik wil hier eerst.
Oh.
This is what I actually want to show. Yay. And a more involved test jig here. This is this whole clump of stuff. Each board here simulates 2 patch cables. So we can plug in a board here. These are all parts of the Fenix that can go around this. And with these boards and this, we can on the fly simulate new patch cables and test signals. So we can, every connection point towards this board gets bombarded with all kinds of automated test things. It tells you, now put this knob left, now put that knob right, press enter. Shows you what the center frequency of the filter is. Oh, this filter is okay, now do this, now do that, now do that. And spits out a big test report on a laptop. You end up building tons of these contraptions. And specifically for an analog synthesizer, you only learn what you've built once you've actually written the test script and know the boundaries for everything. Because it's in the initial design stage, it's not quite as obvious where it can go drift into wrongness. Like when is a sawtooth a sawtooth? So we didn't know. Yes, we can look at the spectrum, but then if you really zoom in on all the tiny bits and how it can all go out of range or out of spec, then on the one hand your tests get broader and more specific. So this is what we allow, and this is what we really need to be right.
Can we look at interface design?
Yes. Which bit?
On the screen, I guess, but anything that you would find interesting to show.
Yeah.
Can also be on paper.
I have stuff that I'm working on right now, and there's stuff that's already gone into production.
As I understand, this is a new module that is not out yet.
Yeah, so it's out in limited form in the Fenix, because it's the Fenix Reverb but expanded. So inside the dual delay, there just has 5 knobs and 2 buttons. This one is obviously bigger. It's also because the Fenix Reverb turned. Well, while we were building it, we found out we had more to say with the algorithm than was actually possible with the front panel, because the software often gets developed way beyond when the hardware is actually finished. The software is never finished. You can always do something better, faster, nicer. But in this case, we or at least I really wanted to expose all the parameters that we have on the inside on a real module. And in general, I tried to make a sort of top left, bottom right flow to things, or left to right, top to bottom. The order in which I take those two is a bit variable still. But I try to make the story of the module go in at least a conscious direction. So there's on the Fenix, I settled for something like there's the usual signal flow goes from top left to bottom right. Like there's the oscillators on this side, the output on the bottom side, and anything that happens with it, either you take a detour through a filter on the top, and you modulate it somewhere from the bottom left with your left hand. So you're always having dedicated functions for left and right hand across the whole design, and then each submodule is a sort of fractal zoom out of the same type of flow into it. So there's always inputs, outputs, and something modulation and detours on the right. So for the Fenix we got to do the whole thing, of course, but here for the reverb module we have the same kind of thing going on. So there's input going to the output, it's currently this way around. Then there's a detour through styles and pitch shifters, and there's a whole bunch of control coming from the bottom corner. Right now it's still sort of a jumbly mess, because I originally was trying to make some sort of star constellations, because the reverb is called space, and since this is rocket science, we have to do at least one space themes module, and if we're going to do one space theme module, we have to go all out. So this is going to be I was trying to make a sort of star constellation thing, and that was a bit too busy, even compared to our other crinkly designs. It was interfering a bit too much with the function. So then, together with a friend, he was drawing some artwork with pastels based on some concepts that I was discussing with him. So now I'm trying to figure out if the shapes that come from that artwork are maybe relevant to be using as a sort of design grid almost to space the controls around. Because the constellations are isolating functionality groups too much, but it's one reverb, so actually everything should be connected as one constellation. No, constellations don't work. So how can we make, in this case, there's these two weird aliens looking at the tiny rocket with the same aliens recursively around themselves. So there's this whole Droste effect style thing going on there. But they can together be looking at the reverb core in the center, and then they can be controlling it while also looking at themselves inside. So there's a bunch of self-analysis things underneath, and there's a bunch of parameters that control the core, and there's parameters for the core, which is how I'm now trying to group these things together as a big story.
And I see also that there are like a bunch of other modules on the screen. Like what is the creative process on something like this?
Of course, at some point I have a plan for some sort of algorithm I want to package in something. So at first there's I have a rough mental map of what kind of electronics I need to make that possible. I have a bunch of modes. I might want to have like 3 or 4 or 5 LEDs to signify something, and I start just blending them together with the same kind of flow, inputs and outputs, and sort of having a almost like one of those yin yang movement patterns around the whole interface, and then it's trying to squeeze all the components in a way that you'll never know that there's actually electronics behind it. So it's always trying to come up with something that looks nice, works nice, and also hides the fact that it has to be manufactured, because that's not a concession I'm willing to easily make. But as you can also see here, the Tuesday was the first time we ever did. This is a lot more driven by technology still than the wobbler and the edge cutter were. So it's also there's a whole progression in how handy I'm getting in actually knowing where things can go and how much components, how big components are actually going to end up on the board in between that. So from here, I usually once I have this, I go into KeyCut, or I have a KeyCut version of the new wobbler here, and then I build the whole thing in 3D, Well, first in schematic, but then KiCad also has this nice 3D view of everything. And from here, I re-export the exact drill holes of everything, because this is usually slightly more grid aligned than it was in Affinity Designer. So then from here, I re-export all the holes, and then in Affinity, I overlay the holes where they actually end up. And then I adjust the design from there, and then people are I adjust the design from there, and after that I usually apply one of these procedural generated mesh network layers or some other
this was my next question. Like, is this truly generative?
Yeah.
Did you write the code for this as well?
Yes, not just for this, it's for our marriage. I mean, we are a tiny family company. So where I originally wrote the patterns for is this. This is the
Evans is an existing pattern.
Yeah, it's based on infinitely irregular tilings. So it's sort of the anti-fractal. It's similar but never the same in an infinite field.
Which I thought was a fantastic metaphor for marriage. So my everyday might look the same, but
slightly different.
None are identical.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful way of looking at life in general.
Yeah, so this whole family of patterns I explored for a long time, and then the Fenix as a more regular one, because it was irregular enough that I went with a regular fracturing pattern for that, but also procedural. But for the modules, I really think that it just makes a nice, not too obvious but still very present pattern in there. It has an organic quality to it while still being very rigidly defined somewhere.
And what's with the yellow?
I like yellow. It makes me happy. So yeah.
That's a very valid question. Let's have a look at some of the questions in Discord. I think that we've covered so many things. Let's just have a look at some of what other people were asking.
We have TiNRS interview questions.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go at the top. How did Cacao Ritual go? Yeah, it went. If we knew ahead of time it was cacao related, we may have said no, but we made a nice live concert at the Cacao Ritual.
Yeah, lots of people enjoyed it. There were some. So we had 2 Phoenixes and a small modular setup, and one person came to it as like, oh, is this a light therapy, color therapy thing? I went, no. And one person was so upset that the music was going to be electronically made that she refused to partake, and she stayed outside. But most people just enjoyed what came out of it, and it's not hard to make an ethereal experience with a modular setup. You just go slow. And I added some vocals and some breathing, so everybody comes in, and it's a church, so there's already a massive amount of reverb happening, and you just very into your microphone go, welcome, relax. It's yay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so we had fun there.
Yeah. We did do a few like polyrhythms that were going sort of in each other, where I was like, okay, I get that you're really enjoying this right now, but most people are laying there going, what the fuck is happening? What is this? When will it resolve itself?
Eventually, maybe.
Eventually, maybe.
All right, next question.
What would you say are the differences between designing and working with a monolithic modular synth like Fenix and modules in a mix and match Eurorack, or other modular synth from another point of view, design development, creative flow, performance, selling points, etc.? We covered a lot of that.
Yeah, I think we covered that.
Yeah, an instrument is an instrument, so you can learn to play it. Designing it is bigger, but also project. The modules themselves can be more focused, because I don't need to supply the utilities, because the utilities are already on the system. So where otherwise you would include attend inverters on everything, in this machine they're just sort of in a central area. If you want to attend inverter, it's there.
You can design within your own context.
Yeah. You can have a unified design language, you can have unified aesthetics for all the color coding. So it makes a lot of things easier, because you don't have to prepare people to interface your thing with their thing. So it's
And the last one said like sales, I think. So economically, it's a bigger everything. It's a bigger investment. It's a bigger time. It's a bigger project. But there's also a bigger payoff if it works out. So.
And we've met a whole bunch of really interesting bigger clients as well.
Yes.
So the payoff has been the emotional payoff has been much bigger than with the modules too. We got to see some interesting concerts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we elaborate or not? Nah.
But
Nah.
it's on our Instagram, I
Yeah.
think, also. So we know that the Zimmer is on tour right now, and there are 2 Fenixes on his stage, which surprised us because he got them not long before the tour started. So we were surprised that he would make this decision of taking a fairly must be unknown instrument to him. So I guess it's also doing the simpler things, because I don't see how there could be any time to discover it properly.
It's completely plugged up. Tons of patch cables going in. So I don't know what they've been doing, but they've enjoyed themselves.
And also on a very different end of the spectrum, Tool, which is a
Psychedelic rock.
Yeah.
What do you call this?
Tool.
Yeah.
Tool.
I think that our fans know Tool.
New Tool.
Yeah.
Well, Tool is touring with
With the Fenix. now.
Yes.
How
Yeah.
awesome that must be.
Yeah.
It's a bit, but the first
like,
concert that we knew of, we were sort of like, okay,
Oh,
please
shit.
don't let the phone ring. Just like, don't.
20,000 people and the thing explodes. No, we killed Danny. No.
Oh my god. Wow.
But it's
Yeah.
going very well.
That is a huge achievement.
Yeah.
So for that, also a different world opens up that in both cases, so I was in contact with the person himself, but then it quickly goes towards the team, because these are moving organizations. You know, they're they have their own roadies, tech, and support departments. So you suddenly talking with all these people, because for the Tool case, it's really built into a tour case, and we have the big plugs on the back, and somebody built something around it, so that comes to the front. And it's patched in that it cannot be touched. There goes a lid over it, and do not fuck with this shit. Kind of.
Yeah.
It's made.
Night after night.
Yeah. So then, there's just use cases that you would, okay, I didn't think it was going to be doing that, but sure, yeah.
Yeah. So, but with single modules, this doesn't really happen this way.
Or you don't know about it.
Or you don't know, or
Yeah.
So with building the system, the context becomes bigger as well. But that's fun. Lots of fun. So yeah, I think that's definitely that question. Then we have. I would love to see how you plan in your general process planning.
Yeah, we did cover the process
Yeah.
of how you actually develop things. But is it for anything
how
also
I
referred,
plan.
like brainstorm, concept design, and how it affects the UI? Yeah, we pretty much covered this.
Yeah. Merchandise-driven development. Yeah, that's also something we tend to do. The first thing that was done on the Fenix was actually the logo, which became a tiny pin like this. Would just. So after the logo was done, the rest is easy. But
So the Fenix part of that is
Yeah.
actually not ours. That
Yeah.
already existed, but we added the colors behind it. Yeah.
yeah, that's the tiny hypercube. It's
A friend of ours made
Yeah.
a hypercube that's in there.
Yeah,
and it's of course CV controllable because
of course
yeah,
it is.
Yeah, has to be. But also, merchandise development for the Space Reverb, we already have a whole bunch of the merchandise that we're going to ship with the module before the module is ever done. But we are just the story seems to write itself, and especially these have the part shortage. You better order it now, or you'll never have it. So just yeah.
And I think we're also, it's very much for ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also a business, but it's also very much for ourselves. So we have to like what we're doing. And I mean, like as in giggle.
Yeah.
Sort of. And there are puns and, things hidden on the insides of boards. And there's always story around it.
Yeah.
There's always a lot of story.
You also have your own patch cables, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And Space even has its own dedicated patch cables now.
Yeah.
Its own dedicated space.
Do you have some here? So? sneaky preview. So
Yeah,
that's one of the giggles that we had. Oh,
Again, with
we
the
can do
design space, of course, we need to have our own glow-in-the-dark rocket patch cable specifically for space.
Yeah.
Because what else? But once you have all the details lined up, then you cannot ignore the last few details. It's just they become glaring voids. So then we see this. Yeah, now we cannot unsee this. We need to have this. So
Yeah,
now
it's all little ideas, and like you need to decide if you're going to invest in them or not.
yeah,
It seems like you do.
And it's always things that invite people to be more playful, to be more like it's a very serious instrument on the inside, but it also is bright yellow and it has glow in the dark cables and it comes colorful things, you know. So we like that seemingly contradiction because it doesn't have to be. It looks like my first synth, but it's a very deep and complex instrument on the inside.
again with the Doctor Who reference.
Yeah.
It's this weird ancient alien that's smarter than everybody in the room, but you wouldn't see if you saw him bouncing around. So bit of the same vibe to it. And also, yeah, again the next thing that's on the Discord.
You need a new suit.
Yes, every time I design something, it needs dedicated suit. Because how else am I going to do it? And this is people may think this thing is a joke, but I am going to order this thing or something like it. We'll have to book the tailor soon.
Are you going to Super Booth with it?
Well,
No, this is for the space, I think.
no, this is just for Big Fish.
Oh, that's for the
Yeah,
fish.
now for space, I think it's going to be a full silver
The
suit
helmet.
with space helmet.
Yeah.
For Phoenix, I actually have a gray suit with all the rainbow things. For the modules, I have actually our wedding suit, which is matching green and with yellow and everything. So yes, this is a lifestyle decision. What else do we have? Most inspiring instrument I have played. What effect did it have on me? That's weird. I think the Phoenix itself by now. That's actually finding out that it works even when heavily intoxicated, sort of reaching into the sound directly. That was sort of, oh right, this can go places I didn't expect. That's
You also have a lot of other instruments like around me here.
yeah.
There
There's
dozens
lots of synthesizers and things.
of synths, modules.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also there's a dig somewhere.
Didgeridoo. Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to have a whole drum kit.
Exploring. There's a trombone upstairs.
The DX7 over there.
Yeah. But those are not the in terms of inspiring. Originally, I was playing with the JD 990, and when I was like 10 years old, then I really wanted to make music, and I couldn't afford it, so I went home and learned how to program. That was pretty much the order in which that went. So that's it must be one of the most inspiring things because it's the one that made me pick up programming, but it wasn't really in terms of sound that I must have that sound that the JD 990 was so amazing for that. It's a classic, but it's not hair-raising classic. I mean, the 303 is of course the one thing that always gets my hairs raising. But as an instrument, it's actually horrible to use. Almost every 303 clone out there, except the Behringer one, has a better UI than the original 303. That's the one thing they cloned too good. Yeah. What else do we have? Prototyping process. Well, yeah, we also covered a lot of that. So yes, we do mini modules, but we wrote the software to actually combine those mini modules on PCBs by themselves. So yeah, it's a very modular way of building these big systems.
What does it mean with forcing it to work? So
I don't know. Probably just hacking and tweaking it. Of course, we also do that, but we also prototype in subchunks before. Yeah. And at the end, of course, the modules themselves are isolated enough that we can still just sort of unpower the rest around it and only power the troublesome area and then debug it on the board. But these days, making new PCBs is so cheap that usually, well, if on the gigantic slab it turns out that the middle doesn't work, just disable the middle, do a new prototype for the one in the middle, with some fix, and then maybe once you figure it out on the tiny thing, fix the big board again to have the working full prototype. Or as would happen with the exploded phaser, that we just really saw out the phaser and just temporarily put the working one in.
So then the question about cost, I think.
Yeah.
So he's referring this EV blog himself, which we think is a perfect explanation.
Yeah.
Of,
and he goes to 2.5 times COGS. We actually go with 5 or 6 for modules and projects because the production runs are very slow, very small. And the software development overhead is very large. Yeah. So just building the boards and manufacturing boards is just not the whole story. And we don't really have a long enough run to split out the development cost over like 1,000 unit production run. So the multiplier is a bit higher. But for Fenix, we started out with, the target price for such a system, we decided 5,000 before anything else. Like we want to make a full instrument. 5,000 is the budget. That means about 1,000 COGS. So what can we do within that? And then
you asked, can you build what you intend to build for that 1,000? Can you get close to it?
Yeah, but the answer was roughly yes.
Roughly yes.
And
then we did some
years,
first estimates, BOM costs and things. And we ended, so budget wise, I think I told you this before, we ended up within 100 euros of our estimate.
Over 4 years.
But 2 years too long.
Yes.
So this is like, that, really good. Other part, not so good.
Yeah.
So is it risky? Well, yes, but everything is. And is it a big investment? Yeah. And how do we do that? We had the good fortune of having our own investment. So we could just bankroll ourselves, which also, to us at least, gives us more of a sense of freedom. Like, okay, if this goes south, at least it's just, we're just ruining our own money. And of course, you don't aim for that. You aim for it to succeed.
But people breathing down our necks.
Yeah, no breathing. Because then the 2 years that we took longer than we expected would have been, a huge, huge issue. And 1 year of that is just us underestimating how difficult it was going to be and how much could go wrong in prototyping and in assembly. And another year is pandemic and chip shortage. Just, taking that out. So, and we continuously, so we always start by thinking about, okay, how much do we know? So planning is your estimation of the future.
Yeah, known knowns, known unknowns, unknown unknowns.
And then attach numbers to all of that. Attach it to the time, to the amount of people you need, to the cost that you have, and just start by doing the math. But once you get to closest to your first prototype, readjust, because your numbers should be more certain now. And we continuously update your first guess into, more and more certain equation of what it's going to look like. And we're still pretty close to our first estimate. That pretty much worked out.
Let me add a little sub-question to this. You were talking about merchandise. Do you, like, when you make these cables, like, you actually need to, I think it's like 350 euros as far as I checked, just for creating the mold with your logo?
Yeah.
Like, is there an Excel sheet somewhere that you're like really putting this in, or you're like, nah, that's just fun for me to do?
Originally, we had an Excel sheet where the mold was included, but by now we have reused the same mold for years already. So.
Okay, so yeah. So it's okay. So this is a cost that you've done already back then, and now you just need to reorder.
Yeah. Bookkeeping wise, we how do you say that? We book everything always within 1 year, so we don't have, because you could think like, I'm going to use this mold on my cables for the next 5 years, so I'm going to spread this cost of that over the next 5 years. Or the machine that we bought, we're going to use this for 6 years. Blah, blah, blah. We do none of that. Everything is always within 1 book year. Yeah.
So in 1 book year, it might be that you're actually now spending more than what you would actually make in these 4 years.
Yeah. We have in the past 4 years, because one of the things we did not do so well, so we intended to keep making modules while also building the Fenix, and having that module making be sort of our continuous income throughout the project. And I think we did this for the first year and maybe the last year, sort of, because now we have modules out again. But in the middle part, we dropped that because it was too much.
Also impossible. There were no chips.
There were no chips, but
So
it was
it's
also just there was too much work, and well, I usually say it's only one head, but in this case it was two heads, you and Lauri, that are doing all this work, and that's your biggest constraint. Yeah.
Hard to split. I want to also add the reverse of the risk. There's also the risk of not doing it. Specifically for like all the plants with big fish, not having done the Fenix is a large risk to the big fish, because this is just our way of showing the world that we can actually do this. So now we have some 100 of something in the world that gives people the confidence to maybe allow us thousands of something in the world. So there's...
It was also an investigation in manufacturing of new things that we were not familiar with yet. We're more familiar with now. But it seems like for every project, we always want to go a step further in what you need to build the thing, how we manufacture it. So a lot of what we've learned, we can use in the next project. But it's also like every time you reach a mountain, you see, oh, there's this other also interesting mountain that I didn't see from over back there, but I can see it now that I'm here. So you see different ways of manufacturing, maybe. So the idea at the moment for the big fish is to maybe have our own little factory line and do a lot of the automated assembly work ourselves. But that's still very much a possibly. This is definitely not going to happen in the basement anymore.
No, because it's too big.
Yes.
Even the Fenix was already sort of put the house to bursting. Can you get one of those bags, please?
Bags.
The bag, one of the empty bags. Because, again, with the merchandise, we do believe in batteries included everything. So people bought the Fenix and they get the nice gig bag with it. But then the reality of, we make a gig bag. So yay, we have a gig bag. But then you, for some reason, I always forget to think about what it means to actually order enough gig bags for everyone. And then we had the whole living room full of these gigantic cubes of 120 of these gig bags. So our house was getting a bit small for just storing the components while we were building the Fenix. So we spent a lot of time rebuilding the storage rooms over there, just sort of Tetris everything in until everything is done. And some factories allow you to sort of do part shipments, so they send like 10 at a time, but that costs more again, so then that becomes a whole logistic puzzle.
These were made in China.
Yeah, these were made in China. But then for the future project, if we are going to make 1,000 of something, that's definitely not going to fit here. So let's not even try.
In the 40 square meter apartment in Amsterdam.
So that's it looks nice and empty upstairs now, but before there was just only manufacturing tables and in the garden and in the shed and everything was covered in Fenixes.
Which is okay for a while. It's okay for a while. So it's also it's definitely, this is our lives, not just our works, which I think is true for any business. This is your life, not your job.
Yeah.
So I didn't mind literally living in that for a while, but it's also nice that it ends and now you can have a living room again. Yeah.
How novel. My favorite Doctor Who episode, that must be the Doctor, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where the Doctor shows how he has modified a house and everything goes slightly beyond into 11 and weird.
Yeah.
I can send a link to this so people can watch it. I don't think we can watch it inside this camera.
Let's open it.
The main thing is that after everything is like, I know, is the main catchphrase. And the whole Fenix is like, we included this and this and this and this. You did what? I know. It's just, so that's my favorite episode of Doctor Who. And the idiot thing, that's I linked it here already. That's also as a quote inside there. I think that we've covered all the questions.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we're going to finish this. This was super insightful. I mean, I think we've covered so many different things, and like you're about to show more stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? Like this is, you know, the problem with YouTube and like the internet in general is that like stuff like this is just getting buried with so much other bullshit. And you're like, man, this is like hopefully we can get enough of a following, like liking, commenting, and all this stuff really helps out the stupid algorithm of YouTube to know that this is valuable. So please do, if you watched all the way to here, make sure that you comment and say, hey Roy, I commented. Yes, thank you. So this is super insightful. What did you want to show us?
This is part of a very early experiment. Originally, this became the Raspberry Fish. This is a Raspberry Pi logo that I had to. Raspberry has been kind enough to send us some beta silicon of their RP2040 chips before they came out, and we made one polyphonic synthesizer with it just to see if the chip could do it, and it could. But I took the opportunity to test some other algorithm, like to use space filling for LEDs, because I really want to have this encoder thing with all these nice LED rings around encoders, which you see in many devices. But I also want to have a sort of organically spaced thing. So I'm not sure if maybe you can see it. Every potentiometer has almost accidentally exactly the right amount of LEDs around it to do this ring thing. So this has been an interesting evening of writing code to sort of drift all these LEDs to a noisy looking pattern that still has enough LEDs to show values around everything.
The drawing looks really Japanese too.
I think it just literally took one or combined some things together.
And these are really clicky and nice.
But so this is again trying to hide something that's very technical in something slightly organic and just blending it into the background. But as soon as you turn it on, then suddenly each of the knobs really gets their dedicated circle of stuff going on. This is for Big Fish.
To conclude, I have to say that this might not be rocket science, but I think it's quite close. It's quite close to rocket science. Thank you guys so much. This was really inspiring, and I've learned a fuck ton. I hope that you guys back home really appreciate this. This was a lot of fun. I'm gonna go back on my train, and thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you in the next episode.